Okay, today I want to talk about dowels, why we use them and how we use them. There's a big misconception about doweling, and I see everybody using mortise and tenon joints, domino joints, which is basically a dowel joint, and yet doweling is just and can be just as strong as a mortise and tenon joint. The only difference is the simplicity of using a dowel joint. You know, it's a lot quicker. So you've got you can get through your projects a lot quicker. You can use them for large cabinets, etc. Anything, anywhere where you need a butt joint, where you want to join, two pieces together in a way, either end to end or whatever, or as a shelf unit. However you want to join those two pieces of wood together. A properly executed dowel joint is just as strong. I mean, you can use a dowel joint to make chairs. It will be just as strong as if you'd used a mortise and tenon joint. Dowels, I think, got a bad reputation with poorly made furniture. The mass-produced, poorly made furniture, which was often out of that composite wood material, which is very flaky, it's not very strong, so of course the dowels failed. But a good hardwood dowel in timber will give you a perfectly acceptable joint. So I'll just go through some of the basics on marking out sizes, etc. of dowel to use. So I hope you find this useful. This has been a query from somebody who wanted to know what was the easiest way to make a cabinet. Did I recommend mortise and tenon joints, or etc, etc? And so no, I'm going to show you the simple dowel technique. Enjoy. Okay, these are the tools that you're going to need to do a dowel joint. You'll need a pencil for marking out, you'll need a ruler, marking gauge. Now, just a single pin marking gauge, or one of these fancy double pin marking gauges, which will allow you to mark out both dowels, both at the same time, because it has the two pins, which you can adjust. Okay. A simple little doweling jig. There are many of these on the market. Different styles, different types, but they all do the same thing. They clamp onto your piece of wood and allow you to set the centre line, etc. and do that. If you don't have a dowel gauge, a doweling jig, then you can actually make one simply with a block of wood, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Clearly, just zoom in a little bit. Okay, the first thing we want to know is where the centre of the board is, and we'll take our marking gauge, and what I do is approximately find centre, just make a divot mark, turn it around the other way and make a divot mark, and how's that? First time, spot on. So we'll scribe our centre line. In the piece of wood. Now this is the piece we're going to butt onto it, so we will also do that as well. And coming in, this is going to be the outside edge, and we'll make this the outside edge, so it's going to be joined that way. So we'll just take our gauge and we'll mark this piece down as well. So we've now got our centre line here and our centre line here. So that's the first step. Now, because these boards are the same size, you don't actually need to use a multi-pin. That's more for when you're using cabinet sides, but you can just use your plain old marking gauge and again, and what you're looking at is you really want to come in about 20 mil if you can, 20 to 15 mil. So we'll work out about 20 mil. So we'll set our marking gauge to 20 mil. So we'll set the marking gauge to 20 mil. It doesn't have to be that exact really, because it's going to be the same either way. And we're going to scribe across from either end to get our centre. Now if you're using a doweling gauge, you'll need to take that mark to the outside edge and just run it down a little bit down the outside edge, and that just gives you a guide mark. There we are. Zoom out. That gives you the guide mark to set the doweling jig if you're using a doweling jig, or however you want to do it. Okay, so that's the top. Those are the hole positions. Now for the second piece, we've got it marked across there. We're going to take our marking gauge again, and we're just going to make a little mark either side, and just highlight this for you, and that's our hole position marked out. Now the good thing about this is that this is why it's quite handy to have more than one gauge. If I'm doing this on a larger job, I have one gauge set up for one line and another gauge set up for the other, so that I can just do it all on each piece one by one. Okay, so now we're actually ready to drill the holes. That simple. This piece, of course, is going to have a hole drilled down into it. So we're not going to do that one just yet. We're going back to the vise with our upright piece, 10mm brad point bit, because what I'm going to be wanting to do with this is finding the centre. So using your mark, which we're not going to put onto the line yet, we're just going to put this in the middle, and I'm just going to drop this down, give it a twist, and have a look and see how close I am to the line. It's not actually quite on the line, so I'm just going to loosen the gauge. It's at about 1mm. So we'll slide Well, back about 1 millimetre. Lock it. Off and test it, and it's about 1/2 millimetre out. But I don't know if you can see that. But we've now got our hole in the centre of that line. So now we're ready to go. So see how that's lined up. This V lines up on your line down, so now you know you've got this centered over exactly where you want that hole, and it's now centered in the middle of the board. So now we can drill our hole. Now, one of the things we want to do is we want to know how deep we want to drill. Now I like to have a good inch, 25 mil into the timber. So set the depth stop. Now I keep my ice cream container, it stops it losing its stick. And I want 25 mil, so I'll simply go up and whack it. So I know now just to take the drill bit down to here. So we'll just drill that hole. Take it off, move it across. On something this wide, 2 dowels is enough. You could do 3 if you really wanted to, but you don't need to. I could use a cordless drill, but to be perfectly honest, this thing is much quicker and easier. And there we have our holes ready. So now we'll go and do the other piece, and we'll do that on the drill press. Okay, so with the drill press, what we want to do is we don't want to go to, we want to get a good bite, so I'm going to go about 2/3 of the way in. So we'll set the depth stop. This is not exact, it's just about, you don't have to measure it all out, that will do. Now I've already set I'm using a fence because if I'm doing multiple pieces, I'll use the fence so I can just, boom, 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 and only have to line up one way, rather than trying to line up and get it all started. It's much quicker for repetitive cut. So all I have to do now is line it up with the main line. The beauty of that setup is that you can do lots of repetitive cuts, if you're doing a lot. So that's it. That's all the preparation of the timber. Now we need to prepare the dowel. Okay, so how big do we want the dowels? Well, throw something in the hole. finger against it. Okay. Oops. Using a ruler, measure it up. Okay, that's a 15mm hole. Now we know that we drilled a 25mm hole in the other piece, so 15 and 25 is 40. We want a little bit of room for compression, so we'll make the dowels 38. So all I'm going to do, this is just the cheats way I do it, is I'm going to set my ruler to 38, and using a pencil I'm just going to mark on my top 38 mils, and then we can just slide that up to the mark 38, and then I'm just going to push through. And we have 2 dowels. One thing you don't want when you're using a dowel is, as you push those pieces together with the glue in and air in, you can create, compression. You can actually blow out a piece of wood. So if you're not using commercial dowels, which actually have flutes in, always just take a saw and cut a small, whoops, where are we going? And just cut a small flute in there. That just allows air and excess glue to pop up to the surface. And just to make them go in a bit easier, just going to chamfer them. Just chamfer the edges lightly. And yeah, I've got part of my sandpaper lifting away. It doesn't affect how it works. So just chamfered. That dowel's now ready to use. Okay. I always put the dowels into the piece that has got the shortest depth, because I want to ensure that that's got a maximum timber in there. So all I'm going to do is just squirt some glue in, sort of trying to get it to fall down the edges, like that. And you'll know by the sound that it's home. And again, the same on here. Just try and dribble it so it dribbles down the sides. The dowel will push the rest of it home. And a little bit on the end grain. You don't need a lot on the end grain. An end grain glue joint is not strong, so it's just more of a token. We know that is our outside, so we just pop that up there using a block. And there's your dowel joint. Clean that up. So that's it. That's the simplest part of it. It works. Oh. Show you how to make a dowel jig when you haven't got a dowel jig. Okay, now you've done everything as carefully as you could, but you know, it's not fitting. This one's a little bit high. You know? And you're thinking to yourself, oh well, you know, I've ruined it. Well, no you haven't. Put a bit of clamp on it. Just a little bit of pressure on it, not a lot. So a block of wood and a hammer. And then tighten it fully home. And what you've got now is you've got a joint that's flush. So one of the beauties of it is there is still a little bit of movement, so you know you're not quite right on the edge, you're a little bit off or you're a little bit under. You know, a block of wood, a hammer and a little bit of clamping pressure, bang it into place, clamp it up fully. All you need is a block of wood. Preferably do it on a drill press table. If you haven't got a drill press table, just try and drill it as accurately as you can. Now, if you've got a drill press, that's easy. If you haven't, mark A on one, B on the other. Because what you'll want to do is, if you use A pressed down on one piece, and you want B pressed down on the other piece, and keep the same orientation, and that will actually mean that your holes will come, will work. Now let's go and put this into practice. Okay, so this time A's going down, so B's up. All I'm going to do is put the brad point in the centre, the hole, that, then holding that down is going to keep me nice and upright. And that gives us our hole. And we'll do that, we'll go through and do those, and then and the bit that we want to put those in, same method, finding the centres, finding where you want to mark it. This time, instead of having the A facing down, you want the A facing up. And find out where you want, place it where you want it. Slide that down. That's going to hold your drill nicely. And that will give you your holes to match. Not sure how to drill a 90-degree hole without a drill press table. Just about two pieces of wood like that together. Stand your drill bit in the corner and you have 90-degree hole. Very simple. And that's all there is to doweling. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you use dowels a lot more. I've made 13 drawer chests with it, tables, pool tables, bedside, I mean, anywhere where you need to be able to butt joint two pieces of wood together, a dowel joint will hold, as long as it's done properly. Anyway, this is much simpler for beginning woodworkers. Get this right, then in time, invest and learn how to do the mortise and tenons. But to be perfectly honest, unless a joint is on show where you can see it, doesn't matter. Nobody would know whether I've used dowels or mortise and tenon, and to be perfectly honest, the dowel is just as strong if done properly, and a lot quicker and easier. Thank you.